Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our final panel of the day, America's Pledge, How Cities, States, and Businesses Are Keeping the United States Climate Promise. This panel is hosted by America's Pledge and Climate Mayors and moderated by Antha Williams, who leads the Environment Program at Bloomberg Philanthropies.
Okay, welcome everyone. The title of this panel is America's Pledge, How Cities, States, and Businesses Are Keeping the U.S. Climate Promise. And I know I speak for our whole panel here when I say that we really appreciate that warm introduction to our panel from President Obama.
It's the hard
Feeling
act to
a little
follow.
bit of pressure here. I do want to take a minute to just thank Mayor Emanuel and Chris Wheat and the whole team in the city of Chicago. They have pulled out all the stops in welcoming us all here today, so I know it's been a real pleasure to be here. A couple just notes for our panel. For those of you who are anxiously tweeting and posting things to social media, the hashtags that we're using are Cities for Climate, the number 4, Chicago Charter, and America's Pledge. I would just add, since we're joined here by one of our speakers, who I'll introduce in a moment, Mayor Ruggiero of Knoxville, who is the first woman who's been elected to her post. We will also use Women for Climate on this one. So just a brief word about each of our panelists. Mayor Bill Peduto, we were just together in Bonn in Germany, which I'm hoping you'll say a few words about. People may be familiar with Mayor Peduto and his work in Pittsburgh from the moment when he really stepped up when the President of the United States made the unwise decision to suggest that perhaps the people of Pittsburgh were not supportive of climate action, and was very swiftly corrected by Mayor Peduto. So Pittsburgh stands with the world. Thanks to his work, we know that Pittsburgh stands with the world and will follow the Paris Agreement. Mayor Madeleine Ruggiero was elected 6 years ago as the first woman mayor of Knoxville, as I noted, and interesting fact about her and her commitment to improving people's lives is that she actually postponed her time in college to organize with Cesar Chavez to improve the lives of farm workers. And then finally, Alistair Child, who's the Vice President of Global Sustainability at Mars Wrigley Confectionery, which is the largest candy company in the world, and has been working hard across the world, based in both Mexico and here in Chicago. And so we're very interested in hearing more about his work. So first, just to say a few words about America's Pledge. President Obama mentioned this in his remarks, but starting in June, when the president decided to walk away from the Paris Agreement, local leaders, including Mike Bloomberg and Governor Jerry Brown, felt that it was a really important moment to, in fact, make plain the disconnect between the rhetoric that we're hearing out of Washington and the reality of what's happening on the ground in terms of efforts to combat climate change. And so launched an effort called America's Pledge that aims to aggregate the impact of local actions on climate change and really communicate those impacts out to the world. And so that's something that binds the work together, and I think over the last several months of work on America's Pledge, we feel reasonably optimistic that we are in fact on track to meet the pledges of the Paris Agreement, and look forward to hearing more about the reality of what that looks like on the ground from, of course, cities, including cities in some unlikely American states, and business as well. So let me start, if I could, with you, Mayor Peduto, and give you a moment to talk a little bit about your work in Pittsburgh. And I keyed this off of the comment that you and Mayor Ruggiero are working in places that we might think of as unlikely, but obviously the legacy of extractive industries, the coal industry in particular in Pittsburgh, is really strong. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Pittsburgh on climate change and how you sort of contend with your geography, with where you are.
Well, in the breakout session I just came from, we were asked to say something about your city that people may not know, and I said that in the Oakland neighborhood of Pittsburgh, which is where the University of Pittsburgh is, NFL Hall of Famer Dan Marino's backyard used to connect to Andy Warhol's backyard, and Bruno Sammartino lived at the end of the street. But there's something about Pittsburgh that you do know. Coal was discovered in the 18th century in Pittsburgh along the shores of the Monongahela. Our city has been extracting coal for nearly 200 years. Our industries were built upon coal. Steel was made with coal from West Virginia and southwestern Pennsylvania. Oil was discovered just north of Pittsburgh in Franklin, PA. That's why they call it Pennzoil in Quaker State. But today in the state of Pennsylvania, there are more jobs in renewable energy than coal, oil, and gas combined. In leading that effort, is not Philadelphia, but Allegheny County in Pittsburgh. And this has been a transition that's occurred over 30 years. It's been a transition that is understood that although we are very respectful of our past and we're very proud of it, that we also understand that our future is in a different direction. So if you go into Pittsburgh today, what you'll see is national and international headquarters of Google, Uber, Microsoft, Intel, Apple, Tata, Bosch, on and on and on. What you won't see is a steel mill. What you won't see is extraction going on. But if you go just outside 30 miles, there's an entire part of southwestern Pennsylvania that's been left behind. And when they are given only a false hope to follow, of course they're going to go towards that. And I think that as mayors throughout this country, we have to understand that those that are holding on to that promise of fossil fuels is very much like what Pittsburgh went through in the 70s and the 80s when our economy died. And trying to show that path and that transformation is incumbent upon us of saying there is a different future. You just have to start investing in it.
It's a great story, and I love the statistic about the clean energy jobs in Allegheny County outnumbering fossil fuel jobs.
All three combined.
Combined. It's quite amazing. And one of the points that you're making keys off of something that we talked about, Mayor Ruggiero, when we were talking about your work in Knoxville, which is that these initiatives, while important to tackling climate change, are not only about climate change. And one of the big ones that you have taken on is energy efficiency in Knoxville. So I hope you could tell us a little bit about how that is helping meet your climate goals, but also achieving other benefits as well.
Right, thank you. It was interesting, somebody said to me earlier today, you're from Tennessee. I thought you didn't believe in climate change in Tennessee. I was like, well, no, there are many of us that do. And in fact, there's a large, many of us are in the larger cities. We're the third largest city in Tennessee. But there is certainly a very strong commitment in Tennessee. In Knoxville, we are the home of the University of Tennessee, and we're just down the road from the Oak Ridge National Lab, which is one of the premier national labs with outstanding climate scientists. So we actually work very closely with them to try and help us gather the data so we can do our tracking and such. So one of the things that's important to us, we've had a sustainability initiative in our city for about 11 years. When I became mayor 6 years ago, I extended it, the sustainability office, which had been totally grant funded. The funds ran out, and we made it a part of our city, our regular city budget. That was something that we knew we need to continue. And I want to recognize our staff. One of them is here today, Brian Blackman. Erin Gill, our Sustainability Director, is home because she's having her baby in about a week or so. But we have outstanding commitment from not only our Sustainability Office, but from all of our department heads and our city staff who recognize that every department needs to be looking at sustainability initiatives. So in terms of what you're referring to, one of the things that's very important to us is equity. And as we address a myriad of issues related to sustainability, the idea that folks who are lower income, to make sure that they are able to also have energy efficiency in their homes, we knew that was a big problem. So working with community partners like our utility board, Knoxville Utility Board, our Community Action Agency, the Knox County Community Action Agency, the Alliance to Save Energy, which is a nonprofit that does educational workshops, and then with a $15 million grant from the Tennessee Valley Authority, we initiated what's called Knoxville's Extreme Energy Makeover. And over the last 2 years, in spending out that money, we have retrofitted for free whole house energy retrofits for 1,300 families, low-income families. And we know that they will save on average about $500 a year. Significant, it adds to our tracking of greenhouse gas emissions, which we'll be reducing in our city as a result of that. But it's something that we felt that the equity piece is a key part of what we do in our sustainability efforts.
That's really helpful. It's a great story. One thing before I turn to you, Alistair, to tell us a little bit about the work at Mars Wrigley that came up in when we were talking earlier, that your comments about the equity goals remind me of is that you said, we're doing a lot, but just don't call it sustainability. So I wondered if you wanted to say another word about that.
Well, 11 years ago when we started, we didn't use the words climate change and saving the planet as much as it was a practical way to save taxpayer dollars. I was, around that time, I was the director of community development, and we were initiating we were making sure that all of our affordable housing was energy efficient as we invested either through our partners or directly. And the city had a sustainability initiative as well with the other departments. And at the time, the Anti-Agenda 21 folks, did you all have them in your areas, right? Well, there was a big effort that everything we were doing had to be communist, had to be, or United Nations, which some people think is the same thing. So there was a lot of pushback, not so much in the city, but in the rural areas. We had one of the federal sustainability regional planning grants, which was very, it ended up being very effective, but we constantly fought those people who did not like the idea of sustainability. In fact, I noticed one of those people commented even today on my Twitter account when we talked about this event. This is all, some people still don't get it. But the reality is most people do get it. I ran on sustainability. I was reelected without opposition on a sustainability platform. So when I won originally in 2011, I said to staff, you can now say we're doing this for Mother Earth as well, right? It's not just about saving taxpayer dollars, although that's a very big part of it, and we've got many examples of how we've done it. But this is about saving the planet. It's about protecting future generations as well.
Great. Great comments. Alistair, in September, Mars made a very significant commitment with $1 billion new investment in the Sustainable in a Generation plan, your long-term plan for cutting emissions. So can you tell us a little bit about, from the company perspective, what you're up to?
Absolutely. And firstly, can I say what an honor it is to follow President Obama on the stage, and also to represent my company and to represent the private sector with you here today. It's a fantastic day. Congratulations to all the mayors for the signing of the Chicago Climate Charter, and thank you for inviting me here to bring a business perspective on such a great day. Absolutely, Mars is still in. We're still in complete support of the Paris Agreement. In September, as you say, we came out with our Sustainable in a Generation plan. This is a broad, all-encompassing plan across thriving people in our business and in our value chain, and about nourishing well-being in the products that consumers use, that we sell. But importantly, and what's relevant here today, is what we call the Healthy Planet pillar. We firmly believe that as a business, we cannot grow if the planet is not healthy and if the people that we interact with are not thriving. So we've set ourselves some very ambitious goals, and we've put $1 billion on the table for the first few years of the journey. It's going to be a long journey. We've calculated that our share of the Paris Agreement as a company is that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 67% by 2050, and that we need to be, at 2025, we need to reduce by 27% to be in line with that goal. But this isn't new at Mars. We've been doing this for many years. Just like you say, before the term sustainability was invented, there were teams of people working on this kind of stuff in Mars. And one area we've done a lot of work in and made a lot of progress on is the renewable energy from our direct operations. We were the first US company to sign up to RE100, commit to 100% renewable energy. Some news I can share next week, I don't think the news is out there just yet, is that we'll have a new solar garden in California at one of our pet food facilities in San Bernardino in California. We have 3 solar gardens in the US. We have a huge wind farm in Texas, Mesquite Creek, which apparently is the size of Paris, which I think is a good link, a good analogy to make today. And actually 100% of all the electricity we use in the US and 5 other countries around the world is renewable. By the end of next year, we'll bring 11 countries to the point of having 100% renewable electricity. And those 11 will include Mexico. I know we have mayors from Mexico today, and France as well, along with many other countries. So we're really attacking the emissions from our direct operations. But the thing that really woke us up over the last couple of years, we assessed our business and we said, well, where do we really have impact? We can impress the world. We can do some great PR with the work we're doing on our direct operations, and it's saving us money. But actually what we realized was 75% of our impact on the planet from a climate change perspective comes from our extended supply chain. It comes from businesses that we don't even interact with directly. It comes from farmers who are growing cocoa, mint, palm oil, pulp and paper in countries all around the world, whether it be in Indonesia, in West Africa, in Latin America, or right here at home in the US. So we really started amplifying our program and saying, well, if that's what science says is necessary for us to do our part in society, if we've got to lift our head up from our direct operations, look at our entire value chain, then it's time for us to start tackling deforestation. That's one of the big efforts we're going to make. It's time for us to start innovating and improving the production practices of smallholder crops around the world, like cocoa, like palm oil, which are grown with very low levels of infrastructure in a very inefficient manner. And whilst we don't buy directly, we have to get involved in that business. It's really time for us to take responsibility from that perspective too. And we need to be innovative. Can we find ways of sequestering carbon in our agricultural supply chains? Composting will capture carbon into the soil. Training a farmer who's on the poverty line and explaining how it could be good for his family in the long term to plant some timber trees, which will bring income in 25 years' time and will also lock in carbon and make us a more resilient supply chain for us. So the plan is ambitious, not just because of where we've been historically about looking at our own business, not just because of the $1 billion that's on the table, but because we've really looked at our full value chain and taken as much responsibility as we think is appropriate and as much ambition as we can to address that.
Well, I come to this obviously believing that climate change is, the challenge of this generation, and deeply personally motivated and motivated for my kids, and think there's a moral imperative to act. But $1 billion is a lot of money, and that's a lot of work, and these are big programs and expenditures that you need to sell. So what kind of case did you have to make at Mars? And then sort of same question to you in terms of the work in your cities.
Well, I think we've come on a journey now from where the science was debatable to where the science is clear. So the first thing that's happened for us at Mars is we absolutely believe the science is clear. We know that everyone in the room here probably is in the same place. We also know there are some people who would choose to debate that. But for us, we're a scientific company. We invest in science. We believe in science. Science is behind our products. And we believe the science is clear on this issue. So then what? Now we've understood that we have an issue. How do we actually catalyze action when we're doing very well doing business the old way? And what this came down to was two things, a moral business case and a financial business case. The moral business case for us, we're a family-owned company still. Mars is one of the largest family-owned companies in the world. And the family is based on 5 principles. I'll just mention one of them today, and that's the mutuality principle. We feel it differentiates us from other businesses in some way. And 70 years ago, Forrest Mars Sr. wrote that the objective of the company was to create mutual benefit for all the stakeholders that we interact with in producing and selling our products. And we extend that concept now to the planet. We believe that if we don't share benefit back with the planet, then we're going to be in a short-term business game. Those in charge today will do very well, and the future generations of the family, my children, the situation will be different. So we had a strong moral business case based in the principles. But the really exciting thing, because I know other companies don't have that luxury to be family-owned and take a long-term view like that. The exciting thing today from the private sector is the financial business case is now there too. We see cost savings, whether it be because we're wasting less, or we're seeing renewable energy on cost parity with fossil fuels. So this is starting to become competitive to get into this game. We're really concerned about our supply chains, would be a second financial business case. We genuinely believe that climate change is a threat to our ability to source materials like cocoa, like mint, palm oil long into the future. If we don't think about that and create resilient supply chains that are resilient to these challenges that the planet faces, that's a business threat to us, albeit a long-term one, but there's a business case for us there. And finally, we think the Sustainable Intergeneration Plan makes us an attractive business for many different types of stakeholders. Not just the obvious, the customers and the consumers that we talk to. We had our M&M's Fans of Wind campaign, which you may want to look at online, which is a fun way that the M&M's characters show that they love wind. It's a fun thing to look at after the event if you haven't seen it yet so far. But also it makes us more attractive to governments, to non-governmental organizations, and really importantly, talent. Whenever I go to universities and speak to the next generation of talent, the best talent, the talent that has the luxury to choose where they work, they want to come to the companies with plans like Mars and the Sustainable Intergeneration Plan. So we see a direct business return for this investment. This is not a philanthropic $1 billion. We think this is an investment we'll see a return and will enable us to grow.
One of my favorite Mars products was on the tables in Bonn, Germany, were subtly placed these little tins of M&Ms that each had "We Are Still In" printed on them. So I was hoping that all the negotiators were pocketing those and taking them home to their children. Mayor Ruggiero, you're spending time with climate mayors as chair of this coalition of 300 plus U.S. cities that are taking action. What do you feel like is the role for collective action, both between cities and then with cities and businesses, and how do we spur more of that?
Right. Well, collective action is important. That's why we're all here today. And I am one of the co-chairs of the Climate Mayors. Give a shout out to Marty Walsh and Eric Garcetti and Sylvester Turner. They're other co-chairs there, and something like 384 mayors who are part of that. It's a peer-to-peer network. We learn from each other. We know that by speaking together, just like today, we can be more powerful in delivering the message. We also learn from each other, learn our best practices. Likewise with the business community, we know that having businesses like you and our local businesses that are committed to sustainability, to saving the planet, they make it easier for us when they are there. I mean, they're great partners with us. I had site consultants some consultants were coming in helping us establish our 5-year regional economic development plan, and they interviewed each of the different government sectors and partners in this regional strategy. And they were very excited about our very vocal and clear sustainability initiatives. They said that's what attracts businesses, the kind of businesses you want, right? They want to move to cities where there's clear commitment to sustainability because it matches their business model. It's the kind of place they want to be. It's one reason why Green Mountain Coffee came from Vermont and opened another office or another plant in Knoxville. It's also with the University of Tennessee, all the really talented students that we want to come to the University of Tennessee and to stay in Knoxville. being a place where they know we are protecting our tree canopy and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and expanding our transit service and our greenways and our bike lanes, all the things that are part of our plan, that's what attracts them to come there for school, and we hope to stay and to add to our workforce. And likewise, we know that this is it's a good business model for us, as you mentioned. Part of our savings, I want to talk for a second. We, like Chicago, we are about to retrofit all of our street lights to LED. We'll be the first of the big 4 cities in Tennessee to do that. Right now, it's about a $15 to $17 million project. We spend about $4 million a year just to pay for the lights and the operations, the maintenance for these 30,000 street lights. We know that we will save at least $2 million a year once we completed that. So we will pay for the infrastructure change, the cost, in less than a decade, probably 8 years or so. And then we'll have that savings on into the future. So again, even though it's the right thing to do, and we do it equitably, we also know that it's a good business case as well for us, that it's saving taxpayer dollars.
It sort of reminds me of your earlier the comment about don't call it sustainability. It's really, economic revitalization, keeping your city attractive.
Right.
The things that are having big climate benefits are more parks for people and better commutes.
Right, it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to this, Mayor Peduto? I'm interested too in what what kind of feedback you're getting from your constituents since either the president picked this little fight with you or you picked a fight with him on climate change.
I won a 3-way primary with 70% of the vote, and I just got reelected with 95% of the vote, so they like it. It's the old expression, teamwork makes the dream work. It's the combination between a city government working with institutions, working with companies, working with community. And again, at the earlier panel, and I didn't get the answer, somebody asked, how do you get started? The answer is you don't. You find those that are already doing it and you empower them to do more. So in Pittsburgh, we had Carnegie Mellon that's coming out with all these new sensors that will be in all of our cities in the next 5 years. And those sensors can detect methane. They can detect rivers of carbon. They can find where gas pipes are leaking. So we had our gas company partner with the National Resource Defense Council, partner with Carnegie Mellon, partner with Google. So when Google's driving its cars around the streets of Pittsburgh, taking pictures of all the different roads, it's also testing methane. And we're finding where these lakes of methane are, and we're making them priorities to replace the pipes first. We're doing the same thing in finding out neighborhoods where our carbon footprint is the highest and where it's concentrated where children live and where communities are. And we're working on ways to electrify those corridors first. And we're using a combination of it. So when we started to look at the Department of Energy of how can we start to create district energy in the city of Pittsburgh, all of our energy basically is produced either by coal or nuclear. And what we want to be able to do is not to have electricity running 78 miles, losing all of that power. So when you turn on your toaster, it's the most inefficient system. But everywhere we're seeing major development in our city, creating the energy system right there. So we've been able to partner with the University of Pittsburgh, and we're working with our natural gas and coal companies and telling them, look, this is the way the world's going. You can't turn back time, but you can expand your portfolio. We're not telling you to just fold up and go, and there's nothing progressive about telling a coal miner they're out of a job, but what we're saying is, come and experiment with us. Do cogeneration with our steam plant in order to be able not only to provide heat, but heat and electric, and be able to use energy in our entire downtown area that's produced locally. Do the same thing where the Penguins just built their new arena and 28 acres is being developed. It will all be powered by a local source. And in a combination between the university, the Department of Energy, the city, and NRG. And where our foundations have the area of the last steel mill on the Monongahela River, 178 acres of land that Amazon may be interested in,
Nice plug.
Stand in line.
that will be fueled 100% with renewable energy, and having our local companies have the opportunity to set up shop first. You know what we're doing? We're expanding economic opportunity for our entire region, because people will start looking for the companies that already have a proven record, and we're allowing our city to be an urban lab for that to happen.
Well, in some of those examples, the utilities, I can imagine, must like the programs where you're actually going around and piloting something that can show where
Not
they're
at first.
losing. Right, not at first, but how did you?
At first, they were very suspect of it and to some degree hostile. And then once the rhetoric went down, I mean, you know, fracking is happening all over Pennsylvania, except for the city of Pittsburgh. We were the first municipality or the first government in the world to ban it. And the ban only holds because during the time of the vote, City Council, I was a member back then, was placed on the Homeland Security domestic terrorist list. And we said that if anyone wants to sue us, we're going to ask for discovery and find out how we got on that list. So no one sued us. So we have no fracking that will occur in the city of Pittsburgh, but at the same time, there are those that view the policies that we're taking hostile to that environment. So instead of going to war with them, we've given them the opportunity to start producing renewable energy, partner with other companies, be able to create new opportunities and expand their portfolio beyond gas.
And in that example, what was you said you don't get something new started, you sort of identify the people who are doing the good work and bring them together.
Yeah.
But as mayor, how did you, what were the key elements that enabled that to happen?
12 years on city council, 7 years before that as staff working with the universities, seeing what was coming out of the universities, pulling together the universities with the companies that were already there, then working with developers to create a standard. So we have something in Pittsburgh called P4. You can look it up, P4. People, Planet, Place, Performance. And we have a metric which we measure. So if somebody's asking us for state grant money, if they're asking for a TIF, we look and say, how do you measure out on all of these different metrics, and here's your score, and then the one with the highest gets the funding. So in 3 years, we created 3 apartment buildings, affordable housing for seniors, people transitioning out of orphanages and also out of living in other people's homes, and for low income, all done in passive housing, all meeting passive housing standards. And the idea that you can't have strong environment and affordability is simply not true. It's just you have to make it your priority. So we made it a measurement that could guide it, and we go in that direction.
So with our last few minutes, what I'd like to do is turn to each of you to say what kind of support you need. I mean, from the business perspective, speaking to a room full of mayors, from the mayor perspective, thinking about where businesses and states, for that matter, can be better engaged to support these efforts. What do you need? Alistair, let's start with you.
Well, I think I would reinforce, firstly, the point around collective action. Our chairman, Stephen Badger, recently put a call to action for everyone in business to double down their efforts in support of the Paris Agreement. That's the first thing. We need to get more people inside the bubble. Someone was talking this morning about the bubble, and we think it feels good in the bubble until we look outside and realize there's quite a critical mass of people not committing like the mayors today and some of the businesses and some of our peer companies. So firstly, we need to build that collective action. That's why we're here today. We need to speak, campaign, lobby for more people to play their part in delivering on the Paris Agreement. But secondly, I'd like to go back to something the mayor of Vancouver said this morning around possibly the worst case scenario. What's worse than knowing someone who's not in support of the Paris Agreement might be thinking that people are in support of the Paris Agreement, but actually the impact is not happening. You know, we've moved from a phase of understanding, now we're in the phase of commitments, but we've got to get to the phase of impact, and the impact has to be enough. We all have to create science-based targets. It's no good for me to say in 3 years we spent our $1 billion and wait for the round of applause from the auditorium. I have to come back and tell you how much our carbon footprint has come down by. We have to be impact-based, science-based, and we need to measure and report. And as I was saying, not just on the parts of our operation we choose to talk about, which for us historically was our factories, but our entire business impact on the planet, which for us is a value chain which extends from a smallholder farmer in Vietnam right the way to one of you today enjoying some M&Ms on your way home from the conference, as I hope you all will. But yeah, that's what I feel. Those 2 things.
That's great. Thank you.
I think what I need is, I think what I said before is to continue to have the collective action that we work together in a larger voice than just each of us individually. Also to have the foundation world supporting this is big. It's really helped us do things to prove the worth of initiatives and then we start investing the local dollars to match it or to continue it on. So foundations can help spur something in cities that we might not be able to fund to start with or give us the chance to prove that something is a good idea. So your investments are critical. The business world being a voice to government at all levels is important, particularly in our case at the state level. To have the business voice there promoting sustainability in all of its many factions or areas is critical to building that statewide support for what we do.
That's great.
I'd just say 3 things. Number 1, keep doing what we're doing, and that means at home working to build alliances, going across lines, and even whatever it takes in order to build consensus, and then working together like we're doing here today, and making it not just the United States or North America, but the world. Leadership for the 21st century will be local, and the problems will be solved at a local basis. Policies may be dictated at a federal basis, but there's a new federalism that is based upon city and region, and we need to be leaders in speaking out, especially at times when people are speaking the other way. Number 2 is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. When you put together a plan to be getting to 100% renewable by 2030, don't let a small voice or a small group of people say, no, 2020, and then start missing goals. Once we start missing goals, then people will say it's impossible. It is possible. We have to plan it out like you were putting in a kitchen. You don't just put the whole kitchen in at once. It takes time in order to be able to do it. And for those that will always be the contrarians and saying it's not being done fast enough or well enough, we have to be able to speak up and say, understood, but this is being done in this way. Do you have a better way of getting to this point? And number 3, we have to expand the base in this country. Meaning, as I go and travel around southwestern Pennsylvania, talking about climate change is sort of like talking about, I can't even imagine what else I could compare it to. It's looked at as a direct threat to the livelihood of those that have been left behind. And there is more commonality within our cities of those that feel that they have been left behind and those in rural areas that feel that they're not a part of the future than there is difference. It may be fought on Twitter, on social issues and other issues, but there is a whole group of people in this country that have a common belief that the future is not being made for them to be a part of it. And we have got to get into those areas, not only for the politics of the elections coming up, but for the reality that in order to get the opposition to be lessened, we have to win their minds, and their hearts, and we have to allow them to see where it is that the future's there for them. Imagine a federal budget being passed, and then instead of taking $1 trillion and putting in corporate tax cuts, put $1 trillion into infrastructure investment in the lowest and hardest hit areas in our cities and in the left behind areas of our country. Imagine U.S. steel being made to make wind turbines in West Virginia, in eastern Ohio, solar panels being produced in Michigan. That is a direct way to be able to get those that feel that they're not a part of it to become a part of it and to help this have even more momentum.
That's fantastic. On that note, I will thank you all for your attention to this America's Pledge discussion, and to all of our panelists, thank you so much for your leadership and time and sharing your stories.
Thanks, Santa.
Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mayor Mitch Landrieu.
Man, oh man. President Obama and then that group. And I have to follow y'all. It's nice to see everybody. How you doing? Thank you so much for having me. It's always wonderful to listen to President Obama sketch out what the future of America and in many instances the future of the world is supposed to look like. I'm thrilled to be here, and I particularly want to thank the C40 team. Mayor Mike Bloomberg's leadership on this issue has been incredible. I'm sorry that I missed Ann Hidalgo, who has also been, as you know, an international superstar. The chair of the C40, Mark Watts, and of course to Ram for having us here today, and my fellow mayors from around the world. It's great to be with you. Earlier this year, Mayor Emanuel and Mayor Hidalgo convened 17 mayors spanning 5 continents and 11 countries right here in Chicago for the Urban Waterways Forum. When we were there, we talked about how our cities can manage and live with water in the context of the discussion that we're having today. And as all of you know, this is something that we're dealing with more and more. For those of us that were in America this year, the summer was particularly tough with the storms that traversed the coast across Puerto Rico, Florida, and Houston. And our thoughts and our prayers continue to be with those individuals that continue to suffer. But as mayors, we all talk about ways to drive economic opportunity, create new public spaces, and find more environmentally sustainable uses for aging infrastructure. And we consistently rely on our urban waterways as engines of our innovation. In this room, we know one thing: that commitment to this continues to be very critical. So congratulations to everyone here for continuing to approve America's commitment to fighting climate change. In this new political climate across the globes, it is mayors, as you all know, that are the problem solvers. We're leading the way because we have to. Now, I'm here today representing the people of New Orleans, but I also have the privilege of serving as the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which is an organization of 1,400 mayors with populations of 30,000 and more. And we have taken a very strong position in support of, in favor of, and in participating in climate change. I know that Mayor Hidalgo was here today. She has been unbelievable and strong on this issue. She also is a leader of an organization called the AIMF, which is an organization comprised of mayors of all French-speaking countries around the world, and she has continued to lead this effort along with Ram. These international partnerships are important. As many of you may remember at COP21, when the official gathering was taking place, there were 1,000 mayors that gathered in Paris to make our commitment to that. And so a lot of us were very upset when the president chose to abandon the United States commitment to the Paris Agreement earlier this year. But as Mayor O'Hara mentioned a minute ago, along with Mayor Walsh, Mayor Garcetti, and some other mayors, 385 mayors across the country have stood together in a coalition known as the U.S. Climate Mayors Summit. And the mayors of the U.S. Conference have committed across the board to make sure that we in each one of our respective cities coming together basically have decided we're going to hit the goals anyway. And I think that we all know that we can continue to do that. You heard Mayor Peduto, who is as eloquent on this subject as anybody in America, talk about specific ways, specific change, and creating a pathway to a future. He also talked about the political need and the political desire to actually make sure that people that felt left out actually have a pathway to where we need them to be. In other words, we have to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. And one of the things that mayors can do, because cities are hubs for innovation and change, is not only learn from each other, but when we do it collectively, we can actually demonstrate to people that the future that we're trying to create is a better pathway going forward. I think there are some political issues there, but there are also some strategic issues that we have to continue to work through. We have learned that we can't afford to wait on others because they may not come. So we're going to have to do it on our own. And collectively, when 85% of the people in America are going to be living in and around cities, if we continue to innovate, if we continue to learn from each other, if we continue to find new ways forward, then we can just demonstrate, as the mayors who sat on the panel today, that this is not really talk. There is a better pathway to a better future, and jobs that are better paying, higher paying, can provide a better future for our families. But really, there's nobody that does this better than our host. Ram, you've been unbelievable. I want to thank you for bringing us all together. Chicago is helping lead the way in this effort, and so I want you to please help me welcome my dear friend, our host, and our leader, Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. In all, I want to say, because there was an election in New Orleans, Mitch, I want to thank you for your leadership of the city of New Orleans, and more importantly, for your leadership of the Conference of Mayors and for your tenure in public service, both as lieutenant governor and a mayor. And I will just say this, Mitch has always been there at any time of the day, any hour, not just for the residents of New Orleans, but as a chair of the Conference of Mayors. Your leadership's been invaluable for us on specifically not just this issue, a host of issues, but this issue also particularly, because New Orleans has been directly impacted as the first sign that something was wrong and amiss and that we needed to take action. Look, I'm doing the closing remarks after you've heard from the president some great panels, so I'm going to be really quick. There's a lot of drinks out there waiting for us. And the one thing I know in public life, don't get between folks after a long day and a number of drinks out there. But look, the question, or let me say it this way, the question is not whether climate change is happening. There's a consensus. The only two places that don't think it like that are 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and the EPA. But everybody else understands what's going on as it relates to climate change. And the real question is not whether it exists or whether you have a challenge, but what you're going to do about it. And the road to the Paris protocols goes through the Chicago Charter. We are all committed to get to the same destination, the same time, with different solutions that are applicable to our respective cities. We've learned from each other. I've said it before, but I want to repeat. You know, Chicago's embarked as part of our agreement. We're already 40% of our way towards Paris. We've now embarked on the largest LED conversion of all our streetlights, both for streets and alleys. That came from a meeting 4 years ago where my good friend, the mayor of Vancouver, laid out what they were doing on smart poles and lighting in Vancouver. We're now adopting that to the city of Chicago. These conferences are not gabfests. We're all committed. We're part of the Converted, but it's from learning from each other and adopting different ideas and then using them and interpreting them in ways that will work for our cities as part of our effort. The LED lighting conversion that Chicago's embarked on is consistent with what we're doing on the retrofitting of our buildings and 53 million square feet under retrofit. It works in that effort. I want to thank all of us because while I'm here to close this conference, it is to understand that we have accomplished something significant, and this is not goodbye. This is that there's a great African proverb. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go farther, you go together. And together, we are going to meet our efforts, and we'll all meet our goals to the Paris protocols, do it in our distinct and unique ways. We've made a pledge with specific milestones and measurable efforts in getting there. I have never been more certain of the collective action in this room by mayors across the United States, Canada, and Mexico of different sizes, different regions, different populations, of what we know is right, and also about providing the type of leadership on a challenge that none of us can avoid at any moment, at any time. We don't have a day to waste. So to all of you who've made this effort, and I know what it is when you have your conferences, trying to find a day, day and a half of time, given all the other pressures we have and challenges and things back home that our residents also want to see us do. So for your statement to be here for this length on a topic speaks to your commitment to this issue and to being a leader respectfully. So I want to thank you today, not just for being here, but thank you for your commitment to collective action in solving a global challenge in a local way. Thank you.